Hello! Frosthaven is probably my favorite board game. Um, it's like definitely in like my top 5 games, just in general. Played probably a couple hundred hours of this. And a video game adaptation of it has finally entered early access, which is very exciting. This is a board game I like so much that I tried to set up a streaming setup to stream a board game by myself. So I'm very excited that this is playable in a video game that's like being deliberately built to play it in a video game. Graphics are great, sound effects are great. It's still early access. There's UI UX stuff. It's not quite feature complete, like there are missions missing and stuff like that. But it's great, and I'm excited. And I've been playing quite a bit. So in Frosthaven, you go through a campaign. It's kind of like XCOM in a way. But a wrinkle that's very different from XCOM is that your characters will eventually retire. So they have these personal quests. Owl here had a personal quest to become a merchant, basically, which meant collecting a bunch of items. And then I've done that now, and I get to click retire. And Owl is the first character in this campaign who is retiring. The campaign looks like this. You have a bunch of missions and a bunch of completed missions and stuff, and a town that you build up over time. So, I wanted to talk through Owl and give you like an overview of the Drifter class, which is what Owl is, and just give you a little introduction to what I'm thinking about when I'm playing Frosthaven, because this is such a cool game. Frosthaven is squad-based combat, and it's built around cards. You have a hand of cards. Drifter gets to start with 12. And every turn you select 2 of them, one of them being your initiative value. So that's why Prudent Preparation says 14. If you are playing Prudent Preparation, you could have 14 initiative. Lower goes earlier in the turn order, each turn. You select 2 of them, and then when it comes to your turn, you select the top half of one and the bottom half of the other in order to make your moves. So you could do something like move 4 with the bottom half of Deadly Shot, and then attack for 3 with the top half of Bloodletting. Some cards have persistent effects, like Crushing Weight. On your next 6 melee attacks, gain +2 damage. There's healing. Some cards can be used over and over again, like Deadly Shot. Deadly Shot, when played, will go into your discard pile, and then at some point you will probably rest, and by resting you'll get it back into your hand. Every time you rest, you lose one of the cards in your discard pile permanently, so over time, like your first hand is 12 cards, then your second hand will at most be 11, because you've had to lose one when you rested, and then 10, 9, 8, 7, so there is time pressure on the mission in that way, because you have to play 2 cards every turn, unless you are long resting. So there are cards which you can play over and over again, and then there are some cards which have lost icons on them. These can only be played once. So Destructive Fury is an attack that hits for 3 and hits a big area of effect. This gray hex would be you, and the red hexes are where it's hitting. But you can only do that once. Every card can be played for 2 melee attack as a like basic top half, which means if you have Destructive Fury and then you decide, oh, I don't actually want to do this because by the time it's my turn, most of the enemies have died or moved or something, then you could just use the top half to make a basic melee attack for 2 instead of losing the card. Or they can be used for a basic move of 2 on the bottom half of the card instead. Characters level up. So a lot of these cards will say level 1 on them, with 3 of them saying level X. Those are cards which are unlocked from the start, but not included in your like suggested starting hand. So they're available if you want to swap for them for a mission, but like you're not told to use them at the start, and you're not always going to use them. You have more cards unlocked than you have max hand size, so some of them are gonna sit on the bench. Then when you level up by getting experience in combat, one way you get experience, by the way, is... Oh, Drifter's a very bad example of this because of how they've done the UI for it. There's actually not an experience symbol on any of these cards. Anyway, you get experience for playing cards and completing missions and stuff. And you level up. And when you level up, you get to select new cards. So... For Drifter, for level 2, for example, I took Shockwave, Your next 6 melee attacks, 1 enemy adjacent to your target suffers 2 damage if possible. And then the bottom half of this card lets me move 3 and get a shield for 1, which is flat damage reduction for the rest of the turn. That's what this symbol means. Round bonuses last until the end of the round. I guess I should say round, not turn. And that's like the vibe here. Within that, you have to work out what exactly you're trying to do. You also have a bunch of equipment, so I have like an Amulet of Life. This can be used once every time I long rest to heal myself for 1. I have Crude Hide Armor. The first 2 times I get attacked, the enemies will have disadvantage on their attacks. I have Winged Shoes, which let me jump over enemies with my moves once per long rest, etc. Potions, which are usable once per battle. Potions aren't like true consumables like they are in Slay the Spire, but they are used once per battle. Explosive Vials, kind of like a fire potion, deals 2 damage to an enemy. So you also have equipment which you can craft or purchase at merchants, although I don't have a merchant yet. I'm about to get one when this guy retires. When you retire, you get like some sort of bonus, like a new building that you can build, or something else might unlock as well. And then you also have perks as well. Perks are gained when leveling up, or by completing goals in combat. You can, or... Okay. This game's cool, there's a lot going on. So you have masteries. This is one way to get perks. So I actually succeeded at Move Fast, Hit Hard. Never perform a move ability or attack with value less than 4, and perform at least 1 move or attack ability each round. The way that I did that was I used Crushing Weight to make it so my melee attacks were all hitting for 4 or more. And then I used Sustained Momentum. Your next 6 move abilities gain +2 move to make sure that my moves were moving for more than 4. I think probably on turn 1 I used the top half of Crushing Weight and the bottom half of Deadly Shot, so I moved for 4 on that turn and didn't make an attack. And then on the next turn I probably made a melee attack for 4 or more and the bottom half of Sustained Momentum. And at that point just made sure I was moving or attacking once per turn. So I got Move Fast, Hit Hard for a perk. I did not do Drifting on the Edge, end a quest with 1 use left of 4 persistent abilities. So all those abilities that say for your next 6 times you do something, you'd have to use 4 different ones 5 times. That's something I've done before in other campaigns, but a lot of bookkeeping to do when you're streaming on Twitch and playing 4 characters at the same time. So I didn't do that one, but you know, it's very doable. The way that I did it was I used 2 melee attack persistent powers and 2 when I get attacked I do something persistent powers, and that way they were kind of like lined up. So I made 5 melee attacks and got attacked 5 times, and boom, it was done. Another way you can get perks is by doing combat goals. Each mission you'll draw cards from a deck, and you'll, for example, be told never to loot any loot for the mission, or kill an enemy before it moves, or kill the last enemy of the mission, or something like that. There's a huge deck of combat goals, and you're choosing 1 of 3 every mission. And if you do those successfully, you'll get perk marks. 3 perk marks gives you 1 perk. And you get perks from leveling up. So that's the perks. In my Drifter run, I used Ample Inoculation to ignore quest effects and add 1+1 card. Quest effects can be pretty nasty, although playing the early access, I don't think they have all of the quest effects coded anyway, so I think it ended up being a wasted perk. Blessed, ignore item -1 effects and add 1+1 card. I guess I have to explain the modifier deck too. When it says a +1 card, I have this deck of cards from crit miss through -2, -1, 0, +1, +2 to crit ×2. And I'm modifying that over time. So this +3 card is something that I added to my deck by taking a perk. Outburst, add 1 +3 card. There you go. Ignore item -1 effects and add 1+1 card. Pretty good on your tanky characters because your tanky items will often add a -1 modifier card to your deck. So when you're making an attack, you're going to draw from the modifier deck, and if you draw a -1, you deal -1 damage. You don't really want that. Reinforced Shield gives 2 -1s. Crude Hide Armor gives 1 -1. So that perk is removing 3 -1 cards from my deck and giving me a +1 card, which makes my attacks, on average, deal quite a lot more damage. Outburst, I already talked about. Scavenger, at the end of each quest, you may discard up to 2 loot cards, except a random item to draw that many new loot cards. I took this and have never used it. I don't know if there's a way to use it that I missed. But yeah, I never saw an interface prompt telling me to use it or anything, so I just never used it. Anyway, those are the ones that I used on Drifter. This is not like necessarily the best. In general, my advice would be go for the good tactical options, which like do something all the time before you worry super much about changing your modifier deck. And then when you change your modifier deck, think about what your character wants to do. In the case of Drifter, I felt like, for example, putting a +3 in my deck was more exciting than something like replacing the -2 with a +0, because I feel like Drifter is tanky, brawlery, like in the front lines hitting stuff, which means I'm often making attacks against enemies who aren't like going to die straight away. So if I hit a -2, like, that's obviously bad, but I wasn't relying on the enemy dying this turn with the Drifter necessarily. Drifter is able to take some punishment if the enemy stays alive. And so the +3, just as a bigger number, the difference between -2 and +0 is 2, whereas the difference between the average card and +3 is 3 in my modifier deck, pretty much. As just a bigger number seemed better, and there's also some stuff to think about with shield. Like if you're attacking for 2 a lot and enemies have 2 shield, then -2 actually doesn't do anything, whereas +3 does give you a full +3 damage. Anyway, I think for the most part, the perks are fairly well balanced, so it's hard to go that far wrong, which is cool. The cards are also all pretty playable, but I do think with Drifter, going for like ranged attacks as anything other than a nice thing you can sprinkle in as variety definitely did not feel right to me. So just for example, there's this Precision Aim card. On your next 6 range attacks, add 1 range and +1 damage. I never played that. I know it says it's equipped, but like this is not actually the cards that I was playing every turn or anything. So, I made a little overview of the cards that I unlocked because I only took one of the 2 cards you can take at level 2 and one of the 2 cards you can take at level 3. I've only mentioned the ones that I actually took. And overall, like all the cards are pretty solid. Probably the worst cards, like the ones that I didn't use at all or almost never used, were Destructive Fury, which still has a use case. 19 initiative's nice to be able to go earlier in the turn. And there will be some missions where if you only have like 5 or 6 turns in the mission before it ends, because something's going on, like you have to escape really fast, or the enemies are spawning constantly, and so you just have to complete the objective as quickly as possible. In that case, it doesn't really matter that your card is lost and won't come back when you rest, because you're just not going to get enough time to play all of your cards over and over again anyway. So in a mission like that, you could play Destructive Fury, but I didn't happen to take my Drifter to a mission that seemed like that, so I didn't end up going for it. There's only one mission I can think of now where maybe I should have brought it. What else did I not really like? No Remorse, similarly, this never made the cut. I found that my party had a lot of healing, and so the Drifter's healing cards ended up not making the cut, usually, even though they're not terrible. Like, the top half of No Remorse is okay, there's just far better options. The bottom half of No Remorse, unfortunately, is lost, but being able to move 5 in a turn and hit for 3 is cool. And keep in mind that we have stuff like Sustained Momentum, so this could be a move for 5 and then a move for 4, which is a move for 9 in one turn. That's also pretty cool. The problem with that is the main reason to try to move for 9 in a turn is like to escape a mission where you're trying to run away from the enemies or something like that. And it felt like the rest of my party was not that fast. And usually everybody has to escape. So if my drifter moves 9 and escapes, like, everybody else is just stuck there, waiting to die. Like, I don't know. And didn't seem like the right way to do it. Worth mentioning, I guess, that I'm playing with 4 party members, which means, like, area of effect is going to be better than usual. Ranged damage is probably going to be better than usual. Ways to stack a bunch of shield in one turn, going to be better than usual because you can have one character get attacked by all the enemies, usually by putting it in front of the rest of your team. So if you can stack like 4 shield on one character for a turn, that can completely blank the enemies for an entire turn, stuff like that. If you're playing with fewer players, it's a game for 2 to 4 characters. That can definitely change things. And this can be played multiplayer, or you can play like solo single player where you're just controlling all the characters. Continuous health, even. On your next 6 heals, gain 2 health. This card should be good, in my opinion. It's lost when you do this, so you only get to play it once, but 12 health for 1 card is good, and this character also has things like regain a use of one of your active bonuses, ways to make this happen more than 6 times. So, like, that's a high value card. It's very solid. My party just had enough healing that I ended up not needing it by the time we were like level 2 and had a couple of items each and stuff like that. Okay, I'm just going to go through the cards real quick and say like good, bad, why, basically. Bloodletting's great. Very hard to imagine ever not having bloodletting in my hand. The bottom half of the card being an attack is just a really big deal because the bottom halves of cards tend to be moves. So if you're standing next to an enemy and want to attack it twice in a turn, being able to use bloodletting so that your bottom half of a card attacks as well is a really big deal. And Drifter doesn't have very many options for attacking with the bottom half of a card. I was actually quite surprised at how few there were. So continuous health, like solid, but ended up not making the cut just because healing didn't end up being that important. This is a ranged attack, which means that it doesn't benefit from things like crushing weight, making your melee attacks deal more damage. Just like very, very close to making the cut usually, but as I leveled up and got better cards, it was one of the ones that I removed. Crushing weight, very good. Tended to usually get played for the top half before the first time I rested. So the first time I played the card, I used the top half, and then because of that, I didn't end up using the bottom half of the card very much at all. But it's worth noting that the bottom half of the card is actually pretty good too. Being able to heal something with the bottom half of a card when you don't want to move, also useful. Again, the Drifter is a character who, at least how I built it, doesn't mind being stuck in melee with an enemy, and so you don't necessarily need to move every turn. So if you have bottom halves of cards that do something other than moving, that's pretty nice. But yeah, I don't know if I used the bottom half of this a single time because I just was using the top half to make my melee attacks deal +2 damage over and over and over again. Drifter deals quite a lot of damage if you like buff your melee attacks and then hit things with melee attacks. Deadly Shot, a very solid card. This is poison. Poison is a status effect that increases attacks against the poison target by 1. Heal ability will cure poison but have no other effect, so it can block enemies who have big amounts of heal from healing. Like if they try to heal themselves for 6 but they're poisoned, they'll instead heal for 0 and remove the poison. And also it can be applied to an enemy with like 20 health and end up being a lot of value. And it's also a ranged attack, so because there are 4 party members, and sometimes there are narrow hallways and stuff like that, or sometimes the Drifter takes a lot of damage and needs to hang at the back for a bit and heal, it is nice to be able to make some sort of ranged attack with even a melee character sometimes. So, like, sure, I generally like to be a melee character, but being able to do something useful from range is nice too. Also, when you're engaging with the enemy, sometimes you'll be 4 tiles away from them the turn before you actually get into melee range, and you can do this on that turn. Bottom half of the card being a move 4 is a big deal too. Drifter does not have many high move cards. A few move 3s, but mostly you're moving for 2 and doing something else with your move cards. So unless you're using sustained momentum, which I generally prefer not to do, it can be quite hard to reposition. I used my Banner Spear a little bit for that. Banner Spear is a different character entirely who has cards which let you move party members, and so my Banner Spear would move and then move the Drifter as well. And I really valued these cards, which let me move for 3 or 4. Destructive Fury I already talked about. I don't think this was in my deck a single time, so I don't know. Maybe it's really good, but I never played it. Draining Arrows, another useful card. So it hits for 1, 3 targets within 2 range, and confuses them, which means they'll draw 2 modifier cards and use the worst one. I tend to think of that as being kind of equivalent to making them attack for 1 less damage. It's not exactly equivalent, but as a heuristic, I find that to be useful for simplifying things quite a lot. You can always take a look at the enemy deck, because the enemies have a modifier deck just like the player. And if you middle click on them in combat, you can see which cards are left in it. And, you know, sometimes the value of making them draw 2 modifiers and use the worst one is a lot more than -1. And sometimes it's not actually that much. Like if they have mostly +0s left in their deck or whatever, then it might not be a very big deal. Modifier deck reshuffles when they draw a crit hit or crit miss, so I don't know if that's actually true, because if they have mostly 0s in their deck, they'll also have a crit miss and crit hit, and both of those are very important to have disadvantage on the enemies for. The other thing that surprised me about Draining Arrows that I didn't really think about until it happened was... See, this is why I had all of these clicked, because I can't leave this page unless I have 12 cards clicked. When I got some perks and put a +3 card in my deck and like got rid of a -1 and grabbed a +1, stuff like that, the value of just having 3 attacks started to go up. Like you're attacking for 1, it seems like an afterthought, but if you attack for 1 and draw a +3 modifier, all of a sudden you're attacking for 4 instead. So, Draining Arrows, if I had gone for more actual modifier deck changes, would have been even better than it was. As it stood, though, I was very happy to play this card. Drifter is often tanking, so being able to confuse the enemies around you helps you survive. And the bottom half of the card, move 3, quite valuable already. And if you're adjacent to exactly 1 enemy, regain use of 1 of your active bonuses. This came up pretty frequently. Because over the course of a mission, I was generally running out of my stuff, like buffing my melee attacks before the end of the mission, and having to do things like this to, you know, instead of 6 buffed melee attacks, you want to make 10 or 12 or something like that. So, a very good card. Fierce Barrage is a card that I took at level 3. It's kind of boring, but because Drifter has so many ways to buff his melee attacks, any card which makes a better melee attack is going to be kind of overcosted for Drifter, kinda. Like another character, this would just be a card you got as a starter card. But other characters can't make their melee attacks much stronger with Crushing, Weight, and Shockwave. So, since Drifter can, a card like Fierce Barrage is harder to get, and ended up being quite good. Did not use the bottom half of Fierce Barrage a single time, but it is worth noticing that this exists, and you can give your ranged attacks more targets if you want to do that. Yeah, again, I didn't really find much reason to use ranged attacks for anything other than a bit of utility on the character. Fortitude attacks for 3 and pierces 2. So I'm playing on brutal difficulty, which means the monsters are 2 levels higher than they would be on normal difficulty. Normal difficulty isn't necessarily the one that most people play on, that's just what it's called. So I feel like brutal difficulty is pretty well balanced, and Fortitude as Drifter's only card with Pierce on it that I unlocked ended up being a pretty big deal against enemies who have shield. Because usually, if you're fighting against like level 1 enemies, even the enemies who do have shield won't have much. But if you're fighting against level 3 or 4 enemies, sometimes the enemies with shield have like 2+ shield. And so making attacks with Pierce on them is far, far, far better than making attacks without Pierce on them. Pierce just goes through to shield. So if the enemy had 2 shield, instead it has 0 shield against the attack. If it had 3 shield, it instead has 1, etc. This other part of the card, before other bonuses, lose a use of 1 of your active bonuses to get 2 range on the attack. That came up a couple of times. Like sometimes you can't get into melee range with something and you want to just hit it. I never use the bottom half of this. Whenever you kill an enemy, regain a use of 1 of your active bonuses. Top half of the card seemed valuable enough to want to keep it around. And like in a 4-character party, on average, you're probably killing like 5 enemies per mission, so it's fine. It's okay. But yeah, it's just, there's other stuff that's better, I think. No Remorse I never used. My party ended up having too much healing, and the bottom half of the card just didn't feel like enough payoff to justify losing the card. I tended, I guess, a pattern that I'm seeing, at least in my analysis of the cards, is that the cards which get lost for one effect one time, I'm not valuing very highly here, whereas the cards which get lost for like a large effect over a longer period of time, I am valuing a lot. And part of that's probably because the missions that I played tended to be like 15 to 20 round missions. If I'd played more missions that were like 5 rounds long, which do exist in this game, then I'd probably have a happier opinion of stuff like Destructive Fury. And you're allowed to change. You're allowed to change your cards mission to mission. So if you're playing one of those missions, you can take out Crushing Weight, put in Destructive Fury maybe. Although it's worth noting also, if you want as much output as possible from like round 3 until 8, for example, then Crushing Weight's still a really good card. It's only if you want as much output as possible from round like 1 to 4 that Crushing Weight might not be worth playing. But if you have like any time at all to get ready, Crushing Weight is actually even better if you're in a mission with time constraints than it would be in a mission that's like 15 to 20 rounds long, where like in a mission like that eventually will probably run out, right? Precision Aim. On your next 6 range attacks, add 1 range and 1 attack. Never played that a single time. I think this card was in my deck a little bit before I leveled up, just for regaining a use of one of my active bonuses with a move sometimes. But yeah, not an exciting card. Didn't care much about it at all. Prudent Preparation, which I call Prudently Preparating. Maybe my favorite card on the character? It's really nice to have a top half of a card which lets you do something other than attack, and the Drifter was my tank a lot of the time, so having the ability to have 1 shield for a turn and 1 retaliate, that means if I get attacked in melee range, I'm going to hit back for 1, and it goes through enemy shields, so on a character with little access to pierce, this is a way to deal damage to enemies with shield. That's really nice, and having 14 initiative is a really big deal on a character whose initiative values tend to be fairly high. I think Drifter is probably the slowest of the characters that I'm playing in this party right now. And the bottom half of the card, healing on a card that would otherwise be expected to move, is pretty useful too. So this was a pretty big deal. Often the first card I was playing as I entered a room, like I would move in with the bottom half of Shockwave, perhaps, move and get a shield, and then I'd use the top half of Prudent Preparation to get another shield, and then I'm set up to tank the enemies for the turn while the rest of the party gets in position. Relentless, the bottom half of this card, I have like I have a conceptual aversion to Thorns in games, just in general. Like over my entire life, Thorns have tended to not be that good. Thorns have a balancing issue where in order to deal damage with them, you have to get attacked. And if you can get attacked and survive, then damage shouldn't be that important, right? If that makes sense. Now, a lot of games have balanced Thorns to actually be a reasonable option, and I think Frosthaven has done a good job of that, but I have a thing in my head where playing Diablo 2 as a kid or something, the Thorns build was not good, and so I will forever think that it's bad to go for Thorns. I don't know. Anyway, this is actually pretty good. The bottom half of this card, on the next 6 enemy attacks within 2 range of you, gain 2 retaliate. That's 12 damage for 1 lost card, plus you can get extra uses of it using the various ways the Drifter has to get an extra use. That's pretty worth losing a card. I tended to think if I could lose a card to deal 6 to 8 damage on the first rest cycle, I wasn't that upset about it on most of the characters. And if I could lose a card to deal 4-ish extra damage on the second rest cycle, I was pretty happy about that too. And Relentless is hitting those numbers. So, yeah, tended to make the cut and got used for its bottom half fairly frequently. Top half of the card got used like one time at the end of a room. Frosthaven has like, often missions will have like 3 rooms, and so at the end of killing all the monsters in the first room, you'll have a turn or two where you're getting set up to open the next room where you can play a card like Relentless top half to regain the use of your two of your active bonuses, and like there are no enemies attacking you, so it's fine to just spend a lot of time replenishing resources. Shockwave! On your next 6 melee attacks, 1 enemy adjacent to the target suffers 2 damage if possible. It's really important to note that that goes through shield. So this is one of the ways that Drifter can deal with shield enemies, is hit something next to them and then deal 2 damage to the shielded enemy through its shield. That's a damage type thing. So the like sword won't go through shield, but this like blood drop thing is like true damage or something. It also doesn't roll a modifier, so it's just 2 damage without any modifiers, any shields, anything like that. Reliable. Reliability has a decent amount of value in a game like this too. And then I already said the bottom half of Shockwave's good as well. The initiative is good. This is the card that I took when I hit level 2, and I can't imagine taking the other one. The other one available was Everford. I mean, yeah, I don't think that card's even that good. But I didn't even remember what it was because Shockwave was such a clear pick. Sustained Momentum. I used this for the move abilities like once or twice. Once to do the mastery perk, and I think one other time in a mission where I had to like escape or something like that. Mobility was a very big deal. But mostly I used Sustained Momentum for the top half of the card, just to make a melee attack and get back the usage of Shockwave or Crushing Weight that was being used by the melee attacks, so that I could keep making buffed melee attacks. If this is an attack for 4, which splashes damage onto an adjacent enemy as well, like that's a pretty good card. And once you have Shockwave and Crushing Weight in play, that's happening. My favorite joke from Twitch chat about Drifter was calling Crushing Weight for next turn, because on turn 1 you're like playing the top half of Crushing Weight and then you have no attacks that you can actually play. So whereas other characters get to start killing enemies straight away, often Drifter's just kind of standing there twiddling his thumbs for the start of the mission. Anyway, once you have it set up, Sustained Momentum is great. Unbreakable. Unbreakable I don't think ever made my hand. The first time I played Drifter, Unbreakable was a thing that I was trying to do for the bottom half of the card, and like 6 sources of damage from attacks targeting you, gain a shield. And then I like thought about it for a second and was like, well, that's 6 health for 1 card over the course of some amount of time. But like continuous health on your next 6 heals, gain plus 2 health. That's 12 health from 1 card, which is twice as much. So then I stopped taking this card and started taking continuous health. And in this Drifter's career, I ended up actually not even using continuous health most of the time. Some of the cards, like, again, like in theory, you could use that. Vile Assault is like a top 3 card on Drifter for me. The bottom half of the card, moving and healing, I think is actually a really big deal. Like, it's not good at either. Move 2 is not great, heal 2 is not great either. But there are so many turns when you are in melee combat over an extended amount of time that you want to reposition slightly and that you want to heal a bit. It's just very common for this to be a card that I'm playing in situations like that. And 27 initiative is not bad either on a character who, again, tends to be somewhat slow to try to get moved before the enemies go on turns like that. And then the top half of the card, it does get lost if you play it for the top half of the card, and usually I wasn't. I was usually using the heal on the bottom half. But the top half of the card is not bad. 2 attacks, they get buffed. They get to be on the same target, which is a really big deal. And so you can combine Vile Assault and Bloodletting to make 3 attacks on the same target in 1 turn, and then all of them are melee attacks which get buffed. Yeah, if you like do any sort of mathing about best single target damage that Drifter can do, Vile Assault top half is going to be part of that. So, very, very good card. And then Violent Inheritance. Especially in this playthrough, I have come around on Violent Inheritance. in a big way. I think when I was first learning the game, I didn't love the card super much. This icon means loot, an ability that allows a character to pick up every gold token and treasure tile within range X and line of sight, unaffected by monsters or obstacles. So it just is loot 1, which means in all the hexes around you, you are able to pick up the loot. Loot is something that I struggled to evaluate when I started playing Frosthaven, and I was like, well, I mean, winning the mission's way more important, and the loot is really an afterthought. But the more that I've played, the more it feels like I should be able to get all of the loot on every mission, and also the more it feels like getting all of the loot every mission is allowing me to then win the future missions. The enemies do get stronger in Frosthaven after the first, like, 2, 3, 4 missions. Those feel like very introductory missions, or you have a bit of help from the scenario setting. But you get into some stuff which is much more complicated and difficult, just like numbers-wise, later on. And so getting the loot so that you can build equipment for your characters and get potions and everything is a really big deal. And having a loot icon on one of your cards as a character is just kind of the most efficient way to do that. So, top half of the card, fine. Also, an attacking for 1 with melee isn't that bad if you have buffs on the attack. Obviously, you could attack for 2 with the basic part of the card as well, which is something that I've definitely done. Bottom half of the card, moving 4 and then attacking at 3 range is not bad to have access to. Like, if you have a card that you're happy to use for other reasons, having a mode on it that lets it do a bunch of stuff 1 turn and then be lost is quite useful for later on in missions where it's coming down to the wire and your characters are, like, very close to dying, or you're under time pressure or something like that. So yeah, ended up being a good card, tended to make the cut. So that was my Drifter. Really enjoyed playing this character quite a lot. It's probably the simplest of the characters available in Frosthaven. So if you're new to the game and want to try one out, I think Drifter's a decent option. It's not complicated, but it is fairly satisfying and quite strong. Yeah. I'm loving this game. I'm playing through the early access, just kind of playing everything that's available right now. Taking the bugs in stride, you know, stuff like that. I don't know what I'm going to do in terms of, like, eventually 1.0 will come out, but my early access campaign will be halfway through, or early access or something. I don't know. We'll have to work it out. But at the moment, I'm just playing and enjoying. This might be like an XCOM thing where I end up playing like 3 or 4 campaigns over the course of my life and then move on to something else. Who knows? Who knows? But I'm very excited about Frosthaven. I hope you are too. I hope that this has given you some insight into the sorts of stuff that I'm thinking about in playing the game. And the next time I retire a character, I will record another one of these and we'll talk about another character. All right. Bye-bye.